On a small island called Corsica, in the year 1769, a boy was born who would one day shake the entire world. His name, Napoleon Bonaparte. No one could have guessed that this short, quiet boy from a modest family would grow up to become Emperor of France and face off against the kings and emperors of all Europe. From a young age, Napoleon was different. He kept to himself, loved reading about Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar, and spent hours sketching imaginary battle plans. It was as if he was born to lead when he joined military school in France. His sharp mind and strategic thinking stood out immediately. Then came the French Revolution, a time of chaos and broken systems. But in moments like that, nations look for extraordinary people. And Napoleon was ready. In 1796, he was given command of the French army in Italy. What he found was a worn-out, starving group of soldiers with no motivation. But Napoleon lit a fire in them. He stood before them and said, "Soldiers, you are naked and hungry, but I will lead you to glory like the world has never seen." And that's exactly what happened. He won victory after victory. Lodi, Arcoli, Rivoli, striking with lightning speed, always one step ahead of his enemies. He took broken armies and turned them into unstoppable forces. Europe took notice. Who was this young general winning the impossible? But Napoleon's dreams were bigger than just Europe. In 1798, he set out on a daring campaign to Egypt, hoping to cut off Britain's route to India. Under the blazing desert sun and in the shadow of the pyramids, he famously told his men, "From these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you." He crushed enemy forces on land. But disaster struck at sea. Admiral Nelson and the British Navy destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, leaving Napoleon stranded. Still, he managed to return to France a hero. The people welcomed him like a savior. By 1799, the political scene in France was a mess. Napoleon took advantage, staged a coup, and became first consul. But power wasn't enough. Just 5 years later, in one of history's most iconic moments, the Pope sat in Notre Dame Cathedral, ready to crown Napoleon emperor. But Napoleon grabbed the crown and placed it on his own head. The message was clear: I don't need anyone's permission. I create my own destiny. And just like that, he became Emperor of France in 1804. This was the beginning of a new era. Napoleon launched a series of wars, now known as the Napoleonic Wars. His most brilliant moment came at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, where he defeated the combined forces of Russia and Austria in one day. Outnumbered, but never outsmarted, it was a tactical masterpiece. A year later, he crushed Prussia at the Battle of Jena and marched triumphantly into Berlin. But Napoleon wasn't just about war. He reshaped France from the inside out. His greatest legacy? The Napoleonic Code, a system of law that still influences legal systems around the world today. He reformed education, built roads, created banks, and modernized government. He was building not just an empire, but a new kind of state. But the bigger the empire, the more enemies it creates. Britain, always his toughest rival, kept forming alliances to bring him down. And with each new coalition, Napoleon fought and won. But then came the biggest mistake of his career. In 1812, he decided to invade Russia. He led over 600,000 troops into the vast unknown, expecting a quick victory. But the Russians didn't fight head-on. They retreated, burning their own land, forcing Napoleon's army deeper and deeper into nothingness. He reached Moscow, only to find the city abandoned and on fire. And then came the brutal Russian winter: starvation, disease, freezing temperatures. It was hell. Less than a tenth of his army made it back. It was a disaster. Europe saw its chance. In 1813, at the Battle of Leipzig, known as the Battle of Nations, Napoleon was finally defeated by a massive coalition of European powers. The walls were closing in. In 1814, the Allies entered Paris. Napoleon was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the tiny island of Elba. But the story doesn't end there. Less than a year later, Napoleon escaped. He returned to France alone, unarmed. A royal army was sent to stop him. But when they met him on the road, he opened his coat and said, "If you want to shoot your emperor, here I am." They didn't shoot. They joined him. Just like that, Napoleon was back in power. This short chapter is known as the 100 Days. But Europe wasn't going to let him rise again. In June 1815, he faced the British and Prussian forces at the Battle of Waterloo. It was close. It was brutal. But in the end, it was a crushing defeat. Napoleon's reign was over. For real this time. He was captured and sent into permanent exile on the remote island of St. Helena, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There, far from everything he once ruled, Napoleon lived out his final years, reflecting, writing, slowly fading. He died in 1821, at the age of 51. And yet, even in death, his legend lived on. He had changed the face of Europe, redrawn borders, introduced laws, and inspired generations. He once said, "Great ambition is the passion of a great character." Napoleon didn't wait for history to shape him, he shaped it himself.